I believe most people, when they watch these games, have seen that Logan Smothers has appeared to be the better quarterback when he has played. What will your thoughts be on Saturday if Chuba Purdy is again the starting quarterback, if that is the case, Sean?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors, but it would be surprising. I mean, the only thing that would be why is maybe Logan's banged up. Maybe you don't know, how those guys came out of the game. So there's other factors that, could always play into a decision like that. But, if all things equal, no Casey Thompson, I think most Nebraska fans would be very surprised that Logan Smothers would at least get the opportunity. But what a tough opportunity that would be to go in and start at Michigan, knowing the circumstances.
Well, yeah, or I think a high-level athlete looks at it as a great opportunity. And that's what I hope is happening. And I hope that happens at safety, too, where Miles Farmer will have a replacement. Sean, Miles Farmer, DUI, he is suspended. You will see Phelan Sanford. How much does that factor into the way you look at this game? Michigan's a favorite. Would you add some points to it because of Miles Farmer being out?
Yeah, because the safety is a big part of the game, and they could throw over the top of him and get a big play. One or two more bigger plays that maybe wouldn't have been there. Farmer had 14 tackles last week. Michigan's going to run the ball, so the safety's going to be there. So, what are we talking about here? Singleton or Phelan Sanford playing in there at the safety? There was no talk of maybe Isaac Gifford moving back there and somebody else playing nickel. I mean, I know that was something that always could have been done, and maybe they will consider a move like that. I don't know, what route, and we'll hear from Bill Bush later today, kind of what their plan is, and maybe he won't want to get too into that plan as far as what they want to do with that safety spot.
Sean, looking back at last week against Minnesota, Nebraska led 10-0 at halftime. They give up 20 straight points. They lose 20-13. But I'm curious, when you look at this whole thing with Trev Alberts and deciding to the next head coach in Nebraska, how much did that hurt Mickey's chances of them blowing that game versus them coming away with the win on Saturday?
Well, winning obviously helps everything, but the hardest thing still is to know is like where is and was Mickey in that discussion to be the head coach? I mean, are we painting a picture here in our shoes, in our role, that it was kind of a week-to-week thing? Or did Trev have a different view of how he was evaluating it? That's what we ultimately don't know, and I don't know if we'll ever know where it's at. But I do think Mickey had a great opportunity these last 2 weeks at home against Minnesota, and then obviously the week before against Illinois, where they weren't able to capitalize. The Casey Thompson injury was a huge part of the weekend. The defense played really well last week in the first half, but the issues on the offense kind of put a lot of pressure on the defense to keep going back out there and perform, which kind of changed the complexity of that game when Tanner Morgan got out a week. So it's really hard to say because we just don't know what Trev's thinking and who he's talking to and potentially has on the hook for this job.
What year was it that Bill Callahan went into L.A. and tried to just keep it close with USC, Sean?
2006.
2006.
USC team that was loaded. I mean, it was the national ABC primetime game of the week. And I think Nebraska lost that game by 17. Is that right?
I think it was 28-10 or 27-10.
28-10, yeah.
28-10, Sean. So I'm asking you this. Does Nebraska go into Ann Arbor with a similar approach? Remember that approach? Bill used a very conservative approach, ran a lot of time off the clock between snaps, just kept it really, really vanilla, and was asked after the game, did he try to win the game or what was his strategy? Does Nebraska just go into Ann Arbor and play it really safe so they don't get their doors blown off?
Yeah, I still remember the postgame of that game. It was, I believe, TJ Simers from the LA Times really pressing Callahan about not being aggressive with what they were doing. And that was a 14-3 game, if I remember correctly, late in the third quarter. I mean, Nebraska hung in there in that game. It wasn't like it was a blowout until the end, when they pulled away. But, last year, go back to the Oklahoma game last year in Norman. Nebraska was a big dog in Norman.
Yeah.
And Frost,
yeah, big dog,
that kind of game. He tried the Big Ten Oklahoma at that time, and it almost worked. I mean, they had a real chance. If you remember that first quarter, I believe there were only 2 possessions the whole first quarter. in Oklahoma last year.
You're right.
I'm not saying that can happen because Michigan is better, in my opinion, than Oklahoma was a year ago. And they're at home and they're going to play physical, and it's hard to do that too. But the question I think simple is, will Whipple do that? I mean, is Whipple wanting to play that kind of ball, and can they get him to play that kind of ball?
Who's the head coach, Sean?
Mickey Joseph's the head coach.
You'll make that call.
It feels like there's a grip still that Whip has on this thing that he can get it off course. And I think we've seen that, especially the last 2 weeks.
Well, okay, stay there, Sean. Are Mickey Joseph and Mark Whipple anywhere close to on the same page at all right now?
I think they are at the beginning when they have a script, and we saw the script, what Mickey wanted probably the OC to do, but they tend to deviate off the script.
They do.
At least the feel that I have right now watching this. I mean, that opening script and the concepts they came out with against Minnesota, it was a really nice way to start the game. But then all of a sudden they just got off that, and the downhill running plays, the 2 tight ends, the under center. We didn't see a lot of that as the game moved on.
Huh. Yeah. I don't know what to say. As far as and that, Sean, I want to amend my question a little bit. They go into Ann Arbor. You don't play to not get your doors blown off, but maybe you do play to keep it close until late, and then maybe try some things to get you over the top. I think that's got to be the strategy. What is your impression of this Michigan team, Sean? I mean, what stands out in your mind about the third-ranked Michigan Wolverines?
Yeah, we had Michael Spath, a Wolverine expert, on our rundown show last night, and we had a good conversation about them. And I think it's amazing Harbaugh has been able to kind of reload this thing after a year ago, losing all that NFL talent, particularly on defense. Some top first-round picks, and they're almost better in a lot of respects. So he really has this thing rolling at a high level, and has been able to really turn their quarterback into more of a game manager, which I think that was the question. Can they get McCarthy, their quarterback, in that mode to really manage the game the way Harbaugh does versus, making mistakes? And they've turned him into a really, really nice quarterback this year. And they've got 2 running backs led by Blake Corum, that he's probably an all Big Ten guy that could be in New York for the Heisman if Michigan finishes out the way they think.
If you watch both teams play, Sean, right now they're both online for the playoff. But who do you think right now is better between Michigan and Ohio State at this point?
I would take Michigan right now. I really would, just because of the way they play. And I thought the game against Northwestern really raised a lot of alarm bells on Ohio State to only beat Northwestern 21-7 as a 38-point favorite. I get the weather was different, but they're limited in maybe conditions and how they can play. Well, we know that game's going to be a colder game. Conditions could factor in, and that type of game, I give Michigan the advantage.
Last thing, Sean, regarding this game for Nebraska. I mean, again, 30-point underdogs. Let me ask you, would you be surprised if it gets worse than that? What is your thoughts on how this game goes with that spread?
It's hard to have that many more points, guys. I mean, last week's line was ridiculously out of control. Nebraska was up 10-0 right away. So then all of a sudden the line was out the window. So I can't see it getting much higher than that. I mean, that's a ton of points.
It is. It's a
ton of points at this level of football. And I can't imagine it going too much more than where it's at.
Sean, always good stuff. Thank you for the time, and we will chat with you again next week.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Husker Online, Sean Callahan.